My name is Felicity Crane and I am 34 years old. 6 weeks ago, my mother walked into the Millbrook County Family Court in Asheville, North Carolina, sat down at the petitioner's table with a woman I had never seen before, and told a judge that my 7-year-old son, Oliver, had been living in an unstable home and that she was seeking emergency temporary guardianship. She had a folder. She had a typed declaration. She had a stranger beside her who turned out to be a family law attorney she had hired 3 weeks earlier without telling anyone. What my mother did not know was that I had been sitting in that same courthouse 2 days before her petition was filed. I had not come to fight. I had come to file something of my own. A document that my great-aunt Vera had pressed into my hands 4 years ago in a hospital room in Knoxville, Tennessee, with both of her papery palms wrapped around mine, and said, "Don't open this until someone tries to take him from you." And someone will try. The document was sealed inside a cream-colored envelope with a wax stamp the color of dried roses. I had carried it in the bottom of my cedar keepsake box for 4 years without breaking the seal. I broke it on a Tuesday morning at 7:42 a.m., 2 days before my mother walked into that courtroom with her folder and her stranger. And what was inside changed every single thing that happened next. Before I tell you what was in that envelope, please take a moment to like and subscribe to this channel. It costs you nothing and it means more than you know. And while you're here, drop your city and the time where you are in the comments. I love reading every single one. Now let me take you back 11 years, to the spring I turned 23, and to the town of Galton, Tennessee, where everything that matters to this story first began. Galton, Tennessee sits in the crease between 2 ridges in the eastern part of the state, the kind of town where the gas station doubles as the post office and the high school football schedule gets printed on the back of the church bulletin. Population 4,100. 1 stoplight. A dollar store on the corner of Main and Birch that had been there since before I was born. My father, Douglas Crane, drove a school bus for 22 years. Same route, same 47 minutes, same wave to the Hollis family at the end of Sycamore every morning. My mother, Renata, managed the front desk at a chiropractic office on Tuesdays and Thursdays and ran the rest of the household like a general running a campaign, with lists, with schedules, with a particular kind of precision that always felt more like control than competence. I was the older daughter. My sister, Gemma, was 4 years behind me and everything the town expected a girl from Galton to be. Soft-spoken in public, sharp-elbowed at home, the kind of girl who got her way by making other people feel like they had chosen it. My mother called her practical. My father called her determined. I called her what she was, but not out loud, not until much later. Our grandmother, Nana Dot, lived 12 minutes away in a yellow house with a screened porch and a vegetable garden that ran the full length of the south fence. She grew tomatoes, pole beans, summer squash. She made cornbread in a cast iron skillet that had belonged to her own mother. She smelled like lavender soap and cedar, and when she hugged you, she held on 2 beats longer than anyone else ever did. Nana was the one who came to every school play, every science fair, every moment my mother was too busy organizing to attend. She was the one who sat in the second row of folding chairs at my high school graduation with a paper fan and a disposable camera and cried before I even walked through the door. But it was not Nana who left me the envelope. It was her older sister, Vera. Great-Aunt Vera was 79 years old when I was 23. She had never married. She had spent 40 years as a paralegal in Knoxville for the same firm, a small family law practice called Whitmore and Gaines, and she had an understanding of legal documents that most people reserve for graduate degrees. She kept her white hair pinned in a low chignon. She wore the same pearl earrings every day, small, cream-colored, the kind that do not call attention to themselves. She listened more than she spoke, and when she did speak, it was worth writing down. She had watched my family from a careful distance for my entire life. She came to Galton for holidays, sat at the table, observed the way my mother filled Gemma's plate first and corrected my posture and redirected conversation away from anything I said that might have made me look capable. Vera saw it. She never said it out loud, not in those years. But she saw it. I met Oliver's father, Declan, when I was 22. He was from Morristown, 30 miles east, a carpenter with a 2-year-old truck and a quiet laugh and the kind of steadiness that felt, at 22, like safety. We dated for 14 months. We were not careful. We were not careless either, just young and certain in the way that young people are certain, which is to say not certain at all. I was 23 when I found out I was pregnant. Oliver was born on March 9th, 9 years ago, at Galton Memorial Hospital at 6:47 in the morning. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Dark hair. The loudest cry in the delivery ward, according to the nurse who had worked there for 18 years and said so with a laugh that made me feel, for the first time, like I had done something extraordinary. Declan was in the room. He held Oliver before I did, which was not the plan, but the cord was short and the nurses moved fast and I watched my son's face from across 2 feet of hospital air and felt something I do not have a word for. Not love exactly, or not only love. Something older. Something that said, "This is what I am here to do." Declan and I did not stay together. That is a longer story and not the one I am telling today. What matters is that we separated when Oliver was 18 months old, that the separation was quiet and honest, and that Declan remained in Oliver's life every other weekend and every other holiday, consistent and present in the way that mattered. We had a parenting agreement drafted by a mediator. Nothing dramatic. Just 2 people who had loved each other imperfectly and were trying to do right by the child who came from that. What I did not anticipate was my mother. Renata Crane had opinions about Declan from the beginning. He was not educated enough, not ambitious enough, not the right kind of man for her daughter, though what she meant by right kind she never said plainly. When Oliver was born, she arrived at the hospital with a casserole dish and a list of suggestions for how I should be managing the first 48 hours of my son's life. She told the nurse at the desk that she was the baby's primary caregiver. The nurse looked at me. I shook my head. The nurse smiled and moved on. In Oliver's first year, my mother came to my apartment in Nashville, where I had moved to take a job as a medical billing coordinator at a pediatric clinic, twice a week without being asked. She reorganized my kitchen. She moved Oliver's car seat to the other base because she had read something online. She told me, once, that Oliver seemed fussy and that it was probably because I was anxious and that I should consider whether I was really cut out for this. I was cut out for it. I want to say that plainly. I was 23 years old and raising a child alone in a city where I knew almost nobody, working 32 hours a week and taking online courses toward a healthcare administration certificate, and I was doing it. Not perfectly. Not without exhaustion. But I was doing it, and Oliver was thriving, and the pediatrician said so at every single appointment. My mother did not say I was doing a good job. Not once in those first 2 years. What she said, in 100 different configurations, was that she worried. That she just wanted to help. That she hoped I was not taking on more than I could handle. Every sentence was a question dressed as concern, and the question was always the same: are you sure you should be the one doing this? Gemma moved to Asheville the year Oliver turned 2. She said it was for work. She had taken a job at a marketing firm downtown, and she found an apartment 12 minutes from mine, and she started showing up at my door on Sunday afternoons with coffee and what she called just checking in. I was glad to see her, at first. I was lonely. I was tired. Having a sister nearby felt like something. I did not see it happening. That is the part one have to sit with. I did not see it because I was too tired to look sideways. I was looking straight ahead, at Oliver, at the next shift, at the next bill, at the next online module I needed to complete before the certification deadline. I was not watching Gemma. And Gemma was watching everything. She and my mother talked every day. I knew this. It did not alarm me. They had always been close in a way that I had learned, early, not to take personally. What I did not know was what they were talking about. I want to pause here for a moment, because I know some of you watching this have been exactly where I was. You were doing everything right. You were showing up every single day for your child, for your family, for the people who depended on you. And somewhere in the background, someone who was supposed to love you was building a case against you. Not out of concern. Out of something else. Something that had more to do with control than with love. If that is you, if you have ever had someone use your exhaustion as evidence against you, drop the word "seen" in the comments. Because I want you to know that I see you. And if this story is speaking to something you have lived through, please subscribe to this channel, because we tell these stories here every week, and you deserve to hear them. Now, back to the story. Great Aunt Vera called me on a Thursday evening in October, the year Oliver turned 3. Oliver was asleep. I was at the kitchen table with a bowl of soup I had not eaten yet and a stack of billing reports I was reviewing for the following morning. My phone showed her name and I answered it on the second ring. She asked how Oliver was. I told her he had learned to say excavator and that he said it approximately 40 times a day. She laughed, that low, dry laugh she had. Then she said, "Felicity, I need you to come to Knoxville this weekend. Just you. Can you do that?" I drove to Knoxville on Saturday. Declan took Oliver for the weekend. Vera lived in a small brick house near the university, book-lined walls, a kitchen that smelled like black coffee and old paper, a cat named Gerald who regarded me with complete indifference. She poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from me at her kitchen table and looked at me for a long moment before she said anything. "Your mother called me last month," she said. "She wanted to talk about Oliver." I set down my cup. "She told me she was concerned about his environment. That she felt you were overwhelmed. That she thought it might be better for Oliver if he had more stability." Vera paused. "She asked me if I thought she should pursue guardianship." The kitchen was very quiet. Gerald walked across the windowsill and sat with his back to us. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her that I thought she should mind her business," Vera said. "And then I called my colleague at Whitmore and Gaines and spent 45 minutes on the phone." She reached into the drawer beside the table and took out a cream-colored envelope. My name was written on the front in her precise, paralegal handwriting. She pressed it into my hands with both of hers, the way I described at the beginning, and she said what I told you she said. "Don't open this until someone tries to take him from you." "Someone will try." I asked her what was inside. She said, "Everything you need. And a few things they won't expect." I drove home to Asheville with the envelope on the passenger seat. I put it in my cedar keepsake box under the bed that night. I did not open it. I trusted Vera the way I had trusted almost no one else in my life, with the particular trust that comes from being seen consistently over a long period of time by someone who had no obligation to look. Vera died 14 months later. November, a Tuesday. She went quietly, which is how she would have wanted it. A small service at a chapel near her house. 12 people. I sat in the second row and held a program with her name on it and thought about everything she had done for me that I had not fully understood yet. The cedar box stayed under my bed. The envelope stayed sealed. 2 years passed. Then 3. Then 4. In those 4 years, I built something. I finished my healthcare administration certificate and was promoted to billing manager at the pediatric clinic. I took on a second role coordinating insurance compliance for a small network of family practice offices in western North Carolina. I was not wealthy. I was not comfortable in the way that looks effortless. I was the kind of stable that requires constant maintenance, like a house in a wet climate. But I was stable, and Oliver was flourishing. He started kindergarten at Millbrook Elementary. He loved dinosaurs and building blocks and a particular series of picture books about a dog who solved neighborhood mysteries. He had 2 best friends, a boy named Theo and a girl named Priya, and the 3 of them were inseparable in the way that only 6-year-olds can be, with a ferocity and a loyalty that adults spend decades trying to reconstruct. His teacher, Ms. Aldridge, sent me a note in October of his kindergarten year that said Oliver was one of the most emotionally perceptive children she had taught in 17 years. I kept that note in the cedar box, next to the envelope. My mother visited 4 times a year. Every visit followed the same architecture. She would arrive on a Friday afternoon with a casserole and a set of observations about Oliver's routine. his diet, the cleanliness of the apartment, the amount of screen time she had clocked during her first 45 minutes in the house. She would make suggestions in the form of questions. She would have a conversation with Oliver that was designed to elicit information she could carry back to Galton. She would leave on Sunday with a hug and a comment about how tired I looked. Gemma came more often. She had become Oliver's favorite aunt, which I had encouraged, because I believed, for longer than I should have, that her interest in him was love. She took him to the Children's Museum. She bought him books. She remembered his friends' names. She was, by every visible measure, a wonderful presence in his life. What I did not know was that Gemma had been keeping notes. Not a journal. Notes. Dates, observations, things Oliver said, things she interpreted as concerning. She had been sending these notes to my mother in a shared document that I did not know existed. I found this out later, much later, from a source I will tell you about in a moment. In the spring of Oliver's second-grade year, something shifted. My mother's visits became more structured. She started asking Oliver direct questions about whether he was happy, whether he ever felt scared, whether there were times when Mama was too busy to help him. Oliver, who was 7 and honest the way 7-year-olds are honest, said once that sometimes Mama had to work late and he watched a movie by himself. My mother wrote that down. I did not know she wrote it down. In February, 3 months before the court date, my mother called me on a Sunday evening. She said she wanted to talk about Oliver's future. She said she and Gemma had been thinking. She said the word stability 4 times in the first 3 minutes of the conversation. She said she thought it might be worth considering whether Oliver might benefit from spending more time in Galton, maybe summers, maybe longer, just to give me a break. I said I did not need a break. I said Oliver was thriving. I said I appreciated her concern. She said, "Felicity, we just want what's best for him." I said, "So do I. And I know what that is." The call ended politely. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after. Something in her voice had been different. Not softer. More decided. Like a door that had already closed and was only pretending to still be open. I called a friend from work, a woman named Priscilla who had been through a custody matter with her own sister 3 years earlier, and I described the conversation. Priscilla listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Felicity, you need to talk to a family law attorney. This week." I made an appointment for the following Thursday with an attorney named Sandra Okafor, a family law specialist with an office on Lexington Street in Asheville. She was 41 years old, precise and unhurried, the kind of lawyer who reads documents the way a surgeon reads imaging, with absolute attention and no wasted motion. I told her everything. The calls, the visits, the notes I suspected Gemma was keeping, the shift in my mother's tone. Sandra listened. Then she said, "Do you have any documentation of your own? Anything that establishes your history as Oliver's primary caregiver, your relationship with the school, his medical records, his therapist if he has one?" I had all of it. I had kept records the way Vera had taught me to keep records, not because I expected a fight, but because I was a billing coordinator and documentation was the language I lived in. I had 4 years of pediatric visit summaries. I had 3 years of school communication. I had Ms. Aldridge's note. I had the parenting agreement with Declan. I had a folder on my laptop labeled Oliver, General that contained, without my having planned it, a near-complete picture of a child who was loved and cared for and known. Sandra reviewed everything I brought her. Then she said, "If your mother files a petition, you are in a strong position. But I want to know about the envelope." I had told her about Vera. I had told her about the cedar box. Sandra looked at me steadily and said, "Felicity, if Vera was a paralegal at a family law firm for 40 years and she told you that envelope contained what you need, I think you should open it." I drove home. I went to the bedroom. I lifted the cedar box from under the bed, the one that smelled like the wood it was made from and like the lavender sachets I kept inside. I took out the envelope. I sat on the edge of the bed with it in my hands for 6 minutes. I counted. Then I broke the wax seal. Inside were 3 documents. The first was a 2-page letter from Vera, handwritten in her paralegal script, dated 4 years earlier, 3 months after the phone call she had told me about. The second was a notarized affidavit, signed by Vera and witnessed by her colleague at Whitmore and Gaines, attesting to the phone conversation she had with my mother, including the specific language my mother had used about pursuing guardianship. The third was a sealed letter from Nana, my grandmother, who had died 2 years after Vera and who had, apparently, known about the envelope and added something of her own. I read Nana.'s letter last. It was 1 page, written in the round, careful handwriting she used for birthday cards and grocery lists. It said, "Felicity, I know what your mother is capable of and I know she loves you in the only way she knows how, which is not always the way you need. I also know you are the best mother I have ever watched up close. I have watched you with that boy every time I have been in the same room, and I have never once worried about him. I have worried about you. So I am leaving you this letter and I am asking Vera to make sure it finds you when you need it. Oliver belongs with you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Not even me. Love, Nana. I did not cry immediately. My hands did not shake. I noticed that. I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time, reading it twice, and then I put it carefully back in the envelope and drove to Sandra Okafor's office the following morning with all 3 documents in a manila folder. Sandra read everything. She read it slowly, the way she read everything, without rushing. When she finished, she set the folder on her desk and looked at me and said, "Your great-aunt was very thorough." She was a paralegal for 40 years, I said. I know, Sandra said. I trained under her colleague, James Gaines, for 2 years. He spoke about her often. She paused. Vera knew your mother might try this. She also knew that a notarized affidavit documenting a prior expressed intent to seek guardianship, combined with your existing documentation of Oliver's care, would significantly undermine any claim of sudden concern. This was not a spontaneous gesture. This was preparation. We filed a preemptive motion 2 days later. And then, 4 days after that, my mother's petition arrived. I want to pause here again for a moment, because I have been thinking about something as I tell this story. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being undermined by someone who is supposed to be in your corner. Not a stranger. Not an enemy. Someone who held you as a baby, who knows your middle name, who taught you how to make biscuits. When that person turns their knowledge of you into a weapon, it is a different kind of wound than anything a stranger can inflict. If you have ever had a parent or a sibling use your vulnerability against you, use your love for your child against you, I want you to know that you are not alone in that room. Type the word enough in the comments if you have ever had to prove something that should have been obvious to the people who knew you best. I will read every single one. And if this channel is new to you, please subscribe, because we are here every week and this community is something real. Now, back to the story. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning at 9 a.m. My mother arrived with her attorney, a woman named Patricia Lund who specialized in grandparent rights cases and who had, according to the court filing, represented 14 petitioners in the past 3 years. My mother wore a gray blazer and pearl earrings, small and cream-colored, the same style as Vera's, though I do not think she knew that. Gemma was not in the courtroom. She had declined to come, which I found out later was because she had been told by Patricia Lund that her presence was not required and might complicate things. I arrived at 8:31 a.m. with Sandra Okafor and a folder containing 37 pages of documentation organized in chronological order behind tab dividers. Oliver was at school. Declan had agreed to be available by phone. Priscilla had taken the morning off and was sitting in the gallery 3 rows behind me. I did not know she was coming. She texted me at 8:45 to say she was there. I read the text and did not turn around. I just sat a little straighter. My mother did not look at me when she came in. She sat at the petitioner's table and arranged her folder and spoke quietly to Patricia Lund and kept her eyes on the bench. I watched her for 30 seconds and then I turned back to my own table. The judge was the Honorable Carla Whitfield, a woman in her early 60s with silver-framed reading glasses and the particular economy of movement that belongs to people who have sat in courtrooms for decades. She reviewed the filings before she spoke. The room was quiet. The clock on the wall read 9:07 a.m. Patricia Lund presented my mother's petition first. She argued that I was a single parent with an inconsistent work schedule, that Oliver had been observed spending time alone on multiple occasions, that my mother had expressed concern to multiple family members over a period of years, and that a temporary guardianship arrangement would provide Oliver with additional stability during what she called a period of parental strain. She used the word concern 11 times. I counted. Sandra Okafor presented our response. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform. She laid the documents on the table in front of her and walked through them in order, the way you walk through a building inspection, room by room, nothing skipped. She began with Oliver's pediatric records. 41 visits over 7 years. No missed appointments. Growth and development consistently within normal range. The attending physician's notes, which included the phrase "well cared for child" in 4 separate entries. She moved to the school records. 3 years of attendance. Oliver had missed 6 days total, 4 of which were documented illness with physician notes. His teacher's written assessments described him as socially engaged, emotionally regulated, and academically on track. She entered Ms. Aldridge's note into the record, the one about emotional perceptiveness. She read it aloud in full. She entered the parenting agreement with Declan, which included a signed statement from Declan confirming that in 7 years of co-parenting, he had never observed conditions in my home that gave him cause for concern. Then she entered Vera's affidavit. Patricia Lund sat up straighter when Sandra began reading it. My mother's hands, which had been folded on the table, separated. The affidavit documented, in precise legal language, the telephone conversation my mother had with Vera 4 years earlier. It quoted my mother's specific words, the words Vera had written down immediately after the call and had notarized within 48 hours. The affidavit stated that my mother had expressed an intention to pursue guardianship of Oliver, not because of a specific incident or documented concern, but because, in my mother's words, Felicity has always needed someone to manage things for her, and that child deserves better than what she can give. The courtroom was quiet. Sandra let the silence hold for 4 seconds. Then she said, "Your Honor, the petitioner's stated concern for the child's welfare is not new. It is not the result of a recent observation or an acute situation. It is a long-standing belief that the respondent is inherently incapable of motherhood." This affidavit, prepared 4 years ago by a licensed paralegal with 40 years of experience in family law, documents that the petitioner has been building toward this moment for at least 4 years. The respondent's documentation demonstrates that in those same 4 years, she has provided her son with consistent, loving, and competent care. She entered Nana Dot's letter last. She did not read it aloud. She submitted it as a character exhibit and handed a copy to Judge Whitfield, who read it in silence. The judge's expression did not change. She set the letter down and looked at my mother for a moment before she looked back at the documents. My mother's attorney asked for a brief recess. Judge Whitfield declined. The hearing lasted 2 hours and 14 minutes. Judge Whitfield denied the petition for temporary guardianship. She did not use dramatic language. She used precise language, which is more powerful. She noted that the record demonstrated a history of consistent and appropriate parenting. She noted that the affidavit raised substantive questions about the petitioner's motivation. She noted that the child's school, medical, and developmental records showed no evidence of harm or instability. She denied the petition and awarded me attorney's fees. My mother stood up when the ruling was read. She did not speak. She gathered her folder and her blazer and walked out of the courtroom without looking at me. Patricia Lund followed her. The door closed behind them. I sat at my table for a moment after the room began to clear. Sandra put her hand briefly on my arm. Priscilla appeared beside me and handed me a cup of coffee she had brought from the hallway vending machine, which was cold by then but which I drank anyway because it was something to hold. My hands did not shake. I noticed that. What happened after the hearing happened slowly, the way consequences usually do. My mother did not call me. She has not called me since the hearing, which is now 6 weeks ago. I do not know what she said to Gemma. I do not know what she said to anyone in Galton. I know that Nana.'s sister Vera spent 40 years in a family law office specifically so that she would know how to protect the people she loved, and that she used every one of those years on my behalf without my knowing it until I needed it. Gemma called me 3 weeks after the hearing. The call was short. She said she had not known it would go that far. She said she was sorry. I listened to her say it. I did not argue with the apology or accept it out loud. I said I needed time. She said she understood. We hung up and I sat with the phone in my hand for a while. Declan called the same week. He said he was glad it was over. He said Oliver had asked him why Grandma Renata hadn't been to visit, and that he had told him she was busy, and that Oliver had nodded and gone back to his dinosaur puzzle. Children absorb more than we tell them and less than we fear. I told Oliver, in the weeks that followed, only what he needed to know. I told him that sometimes grown-ups have disagreements and that it had nothing to do with him. He looked at me with those dark eyes he has, the ones that have always seemed to hold more than 7 years should contain, and he said, "Are you okay, Mama?" I told him yes. He nodded and climbed into my lap, which he is almost too big to do, and I held him for longer than I usually allow myself. There is a cedar box under my bed. The envelope is back inside it, empty now. The 3 documents are in a legal file at Sandra Okafor's office. But I kept Nana.'s letter. It is in the cedar box with Ms. Aldridge's note and Oliver's first lost tooth in a tiny paper envelope from the dentist's office and a photograph of Vera at her kitchen table with Gerald the cat on her lap and a cup of coffee in her hand, taken the last time I visited her in Knoxville. I think about what Vera said to me in that kitchen, the full version, not just the line about the envelope. She said, "Felicity, the people who love you most are not always the loudest ones in the room. Sometimes they are the ones who have been quietly preparing for the moment you need them." She said it the way she said most things, without ceremony, looking at me directly over the rim of her coffee cup. I thought I understood it then. I understand it better now. My mother believed, I think, that she was acting out of love. I have thought about this a great deal in the past 6 weeks, driving to work, lying awake at 2 a.m., washing dishes while Oliver does his reading in the next room. I think she loved me in the only language she knew, which was a language of management and correction and the persistent belief that I needed to be handled. I think Gemma learned that language from her. I think neither of them ever considered that what looks like concern from the inside can look like something else entirely from the outside, from a courtroom, from a judge's bench, from a notarized affidavit written 4 years in advance by a woman who had watched our family long enough to know exactly what was coming. I am not angry. I want to be clear about that, because I know it might be hard to believe. I am not performing peace. I am not suppressing something. I have had 6 weeks to sit with this, and what I feel is not anger. It is a kind of settled sadness, the kind that comes when you finally stop hoping that a relationship will become something it was never going to be. My mother and I will not be close. That is not a punishment I am delivering. It is a fact I am accepting. The boundary I have drawn is not a wall I built to keep her out. It is a line I drew to keep Oliver safe, and that is a different thing entirely. Oliver had a school project last month. He had to draw his family. He drew me. He drew Declan. He drew Priscilla, who he calls Aunt Pris, and Theo and Priya, and Declan's mother, who makes him grilled cheese on Saturday mornings when he stays over there. He drew a cat named Gerald, who he has never met but who I have told him about. He drew a woman in pearl earrings sitting at a kitchen table with a coffee cup, and when I asked him who that was, he said, "That's the lady who saved you, Mama. You told me about her." I had not told him that exactly. I had told him that I had a great-aunt named Vera who loved me very much and who died when he was 3. He had assembled the rest from the way I said her name. He drew a sun in the corner of the paper, the way children always do, yellow and round with lines radiating outward. He put it in the upper right corner, which is where he always puts it. I asked him once why the sun was always in the corner and not in the middle of the sky. He said, "Because that's where it fits, Mama. Everything fits somewhere." I put the drawing in the cedar box. If you are watching this tonight and you recognize something in this story, if you have ever had your love for your child used as evidence against you, if you have ever had to prove in a room full of strangers what should have been obvious to the people who knew you longest, I want you to know that the truth has a way of holding. It does not always hold immediately. It does not always hold loudly. But it holds. Document what you do. Keep the records. Trust the people who see you clearly. And do not mistake someone's volume for someone's righteousness. The people who love you most are not always the loudest ones in the room. Drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from tonight, and what time it is where you are. Tell me if this story spoke to something you have lived. I read every single comment and I am grateful for every one. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Hit subscribe if this channel is new to you, and I will see you in the next one.